Okay guys, this is podcast number 10 and as always I'm joined by Craig Seaton. I'm Chet Carson. We're just going to go straight into this podcast, not mess around with the introduction. How are you doing, Craig?
I'm good, man. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm really good, yeah. I don't think people really appreciate how long this takes to set everything up. Yeah, originally it would literally take us about 10-15 minutes when I was coming over to your place before the quarantine and the lockdown. I just came over to your place, we set everything up, all the settings were ready to go, and he pushed record. And now I'm having to bring all the stuff into this studio, making sure that the microphone's working, the stream's working, my camera's shooting. And yeah, I think we've got a bit more stuff to worry about these days.
It's a labour of love, man.
Yeah, it is. How are you doing anyway?
Yeah, good, mate. Good. Had a couple of walks the last few days, just out to the shops and walk around the canal in town. And
yeah.
It's nice. Abs went down to Market Street the other day to go to the Marks and Spencers, and she said there's a lot more people that seem to be out now, especially when the sun's out.
Yeah.
So I think people's tolerance levels are kind of getting towards the end of the threshold, which can be a good or a bad thing, because there might be enough people where the government has to say, all right, we start letting people out in waves. But that would have to fall in line also with the numbers and the infection rates, which I think is lessening now for the death toll.
Yeah.
It's hard to figure out the statistics and the numbers because they weren't including like homes for old people, which they are including now. And I've read other reports where people have been dying of other infections in the lungs or just illnesses in general, and they're adding those to the corona numbers.
Right,
so
yeah.
hard to figure out
the numbers are not
rightly,
consistent. They're definitely not consistent, mate. I think they're literally adding anyone to the death toll these days. But I've definitely noticed when I've walked into Manchester this morning, this afternoon, that there's way more people on the street than there previously was. So a week ago, there's hardly anyone. You know, you see one or two people. Now there's at least about, you walk into about 10-15 people. So yeah, I just think people are a bit less panicked now that 3 weeks have already gone by.
Yeah, man, that's it. I mean, still, personally, I don't know anybody who's had it, but I do now have people who know somebody who's had it.
Right,
so a friend of mine, his father, he's got some heart conditions, he's got it, which is dangerous and a sad state of affairs. But there's actually people who I know somebody close who has it.
Right.
But it's only those people they know are in an unhealthy status of life anyway, whether it's an illness, a disease, or the body isn't in a healthy state to maintain the balance of it. Because again, you hear mixed things like, oh, young people are getting it now and whatnot, but it still lets question how many people do you know who are healthy and have got it. So if we're in a good state of health, I think people are going to be fine. That's just, again, I'm no scientist on this stuff, but from my own personal experience and what I've been keeping an eye on, if you're in good health, you're eating clean, your health is already at a good standard, I think we're all going to be okay.
Yeah, I just think you'll probably catch it, but you'll develop an immunity to it.
We may have already had it. Yeah, it may have come and gone within us, and different heights and degrees of the virus itself too. So like lesser strains.
Yeah, definitely.
And how are you doing, man? How are you getting on?
I'm good. Well, apart from all the setup and stuff, I actually bought my pop filter. I don't know if you can see it, but so this time I don't have to put my sock around the microphone and look like an idiot. So I'm happy that I've bought the pop filter. What I might do is I might just leave all the equipment here. So then that way, next time I'm here, all I have to do is set it all up and not worry about bringing stuff in. But it's been really good. This studio has been really, it's been a blessing. It's almost been a fortress of solitude from Superman, if you want to call it. Because I come in here, I'm on my own. What I usually do is I end up doing breath work. If we've got a podcast, then I don't worry about those kind of things. I'll tend to do it after the podcast. But usually I come in here, do breath work for about half an hour, meditate, and then do the rest of my stuff. So yesterday I shot a video. I'm going to start releasing stretching videos as well. So what stretches people could be using at home whilst they're under quarantine. So and I think a lot of people will be lounging around on their sofas, etc. So it's a great time to be working on your flexibility. So I'm going to push that. Hopefully tomorrow I release the video. So yeah, I'm really pumped. Like I said to you on the previous podcast, I've had this really deep drive to get things done. but I've told myself I'm going to give myself 2 weeks off, and then now I'm really pushing it now. So last week I started doing my handstand classes online. It's been great, and now I'm really trying to push all the stuff on social media again, and yeah, just trying to help people out as much as possible in my own way.
Yeah, lovely, man. It's getting that nice balance, isn't it? I took some time out myself, which was required, doing some bit deeper work on myself by letting go and stopping and really reflecting on it, speaking to a couple of good friends about it and seeing where I'm at, and putting so much pressure on myself to be doing something with this time to get as much out there as I can, because now people need it the most. And also there's that want to help, but also where is that want coming from? Where is that desire that wants to help coming from? It's not always a healthy place, and sometimes it can be a lack of worth. So for me, I really have to look at that and think, am I trying to fill a hole by always pushing stuff out and giving, like, I've got to do more, I've got to give out more free sessions, got to help and reply to every comment and things like this. So it's been really eye-opening to be able to bring that and slow that down and see that sometimes it's coming from a lack within myself that isn't fully complete, and being able to ignore that by pushing outwards, always going out. If you keep giving, you're fine. If you're doing something good, you're helping, you're doing something right, but it can be also skewered within those shadow elements of ourselves.
Okay, so this perfectly goes into our topic that we want to talk about mainly in this podcast, which is how does a man become a man in today's society, with everything that's going on, with all the stuff about toxic masculinity, the stuff about the patriarchy and feminism just being pushed down our throat. How do we survive? How do we react?
I'd like to hear your take first, buddy. I'd like to hear what you think on this.
It's an interesting topic, and I feel like with everything that's happened, I would say in the last 2 or 3 years, especially stuff surrounding Jordan Peterson, especially, how he became very mainstream straight away after the controversy over Bill C-16, where using certain pronouns to refer to certain people, it was going to be set in law in Canada, and he was against that. He wasn't against the referring to someone as a different pronoun, but he was against the government, forcing that on you, telling you what you should do. The government should tell you what you shouldn't do. So obviously you shouldn't be racist and you shouldn't steal and you shouldn't kill anyone. But I don't think an authority should tell you what to do. I think that's very dangerous. And for me, that's where my journey started in terms of understanding the political side of it. Because originally I wanted nothing to do with politics. But then I started to understand that as times change and as people change, I don't know, I just feel like people are becoming way more, you can call it aware, or for me personally, I think people are becoming quite sensitive about these topics. And rightly so, to a certain degree, you should be sensitive, but I don't think you should be forcing it down anyone's throat. So in terms of the patriarchy and toxic masculinity, I think, and this might be controversial, and this might be one of those podcasts that turns into a controversial debate, but I just feel like the patriarchy, we've seen what it's done in the past, where we've created civilizations, we've created amazing civilizations, right, like the Roman Empire, the Egyptian Empire, the Greek Empire, etc. But at the same time, we've done a lot of damage as well. We've created a lot of wars. We've conquered an entire, a completely different world. We're talking about the Americas, so North and South America, completely destroyed all their people. So that still encompasses patriarchy, so of what historical patriarchy did. But in terms of masculinity, we need to be very careful about separating masculinity away from patriarchy. I think when people confuse the two together, that's when things become really dangerous. The typical masculine traits are not torrential. It doesn't cause problems. I think what causes problems is when you don't have a balance between feminism, the feminist traits, and the masculine traits that you have inside of you. So we're all born with dualistic traits. The entire nature as we know it has these dualistic traits. So night and day, male and female, etc. So I think we need to find a balance between the two, and every single individual has a combination of the two. So a lot of people tend to have either dominant feminine traits or dominant masculine traits, depending on the person's characteristics. And I think we need to be very careful where we don't try and push the feminine traits as the sort of preferred traits. And we try and tell people that both traits are just as important as each other. And I've been reading a book called, and I read it a while ago, about 4 or 5 years ago, but I didn't think I fully understood it back then, but now I really do. It's called King, Magician, Warrior, Lover. I don't know if you've heard of it.
No.
Yeah, Robert Moore is a really fascinating book. It's based on what you're looking at, which is Jungian theory. So Carl Jung's theory and all the theories going into how to understand the mind and people's personalities and psychology, etc. And he talks about what modern masculinity, the toxic masculinity that we're seeing in the news is all about, is this thing called boy psychology. So there's boy psychology and there's man psychology. The difference between boy psychology and man psychology is a man could be growing up and aging, yet still adopt those boy psychological traits. So let me give you an example. You know, we have people that are, and again, this is not putting anyone down, but from what I've seen when I've worked in the security industry, there's a lot of guys that are in their mid to late 30s, in their 40s, and they still act like boys. You know, they're playing video games. Again, like, obviously it's not a bad thing if you're playing it for the reason of playing it and not doing it because you're escaping your daily life. So these guys are just playing video games and, you know, they're just living this life, living under their mother's house, and it's not good for us. It's not good for us. Where's the call to adventure? Where's the call for purpose? And I feel like men should be striving for adversity and sacrifice. You know, we should be looking for situations where we almost put ourselves in suffering situations, and we have to sacrifice for us to develop as human beings and as men. So I think that's one thing that needs to be looked at with a magnifying glass, and just to be maybe even discussed, not completely shut down. You know.
Yeah. To take that conversation somewhere else, let's recall this point of what the actual topic is. But that transition from boyhood to manhood, you know, is gone from our societies. We don't have that understanding of when that transition has taken place. Remember when I was studying this in transpersonal psychology, we would use tribes and other cultures as that reference to understanding that they would have a clear point. You go out into a tribe would send their boy at whatever age, maybe 13, 15. You go off out into the woods, into the wilderness, live there for however many days, come back in, instantly recognised as a man, no longer a boy.
There is a ritual, isn't it? The ritual,
Yeah, that part of definition. Not only does the whole society and group are able to relate and understand where he's coming from and who he is, what his role now is in society, he has so much clarity in understanding that I'm no longer a boy, I'm a man now. So all of that things that we can let go of, that keep you in that in-between stage, because you're right, we will go up for certain things and we'll come down for others. We might go to work and pay our bills and our job, and then we may treat our partners disrespectful and sleep around a lot and play video games and eat junk food, and then go to work and be a businessman in a suit. It's, yes, we have these multifaceted aspects of the personality and who we are, but a lot of them are not ironed out, and they are complete contradictions rather than understood and integrated, and hence the shadow work and archetypical understanding. So because we don't have any of that reference point of, am I a man, but I'm a boy? And in fact, I don't even think we question that. What is that to be a man? One, because it's so dirty now, in the sense that nobody wants to think that they're not a man. And how can you be told if you are or aren't a man by somebody? Like, you know me, I might be hard and be able to punch someone in the face, so I'm a man, you know, or whatever the symptom is that we address that masculinity with. Well, when we have that cut-off point, you go off, you do your thing for 10 days, whatever, come back, and you can do it now. You're accepted as a man. Where do we have that in society other than go to university, completely mess around, get drunk, maybe you study, get your work done, but you're supposed to be squeezing out like the last of your partying, and people say these, you know, maybe often they will say they were the best days of your life, and it's like they should not be, like, partying and whatnot. Yeah, it's fun, and integrate that into your life, have fun, have those celebrations, but you can offer something to society. A boy can, a man can, he can put his work into society and create his life around that, offering the sacrifice that you mentioned. Maybe it doesn't even have to be a sacrifice. I don't feel like I'm sacrificing when I'm doing breath work or teaching all these talks. I'm doing something I love, and I do feel it provides something to others at the same time. But it's where would you nowadays define how you can go from a boy to become a man? And the same with girls to a woman. How does a woman define that now? Is it, I've got to be a mother before I'm settled down and relaxed in that state? Is it defined by the job role, the attributes that they have about themselves? I mean, I can think of a good few female friends who I would define as women. They're women, while there's a lot I know are girls. The same with men. And reflection on myself, when I have the parts that are a man and the parts that are a boy, the ones that are the boy, they need to be worked on. They need to be integrated and seen. Why do I still have those behaviours? Why haven't they been ingested yet?
Yeah, I completely agree with everything you've just said. I think going back to we'll talk about women in a second, but I think in regards to men, we don't have that ritualistic aspect. We don't have a definitive ritual where, obviously, like you said, in tribal societies, the young boy, the adolescent boy, will be pulled almost from his mother's teat and chucked into the wild and made to kind of overcome the adverse situation to transform into a man. Either he dies in that situation, which is the sacrifice, the physical sacrifice that we're talking about, or he transforms into a man. But then also we're talking about the sacrifice in the sense of a metaphorical sacrifice. So, for example, let's use that same example of going to university. Now, most people, and we want to talk about men mainly, but most guys will tend to go to university and almost, so it's about, I would say 20-30% for the average guy. It's about 20 or 30% studying, and the rest of it just partying, taking drugs and sleeping as much as possible. So, you might not do one of those things, or you might choose to not take drugs or party, but you'll end up sleeping with a lot of women. I think we've got the definition of being a man is very much skewed in today's society. We don't understand it. Whereas I think with the whole feminist movement, it's almost pushed what a woman should be like. And then again, we'll talk about that in a second, but back to guys, I think when you go to university, the only rituals you tend to get are those pseudo rituals. So this book, King, Magician, Warrior, Lover, the author Robert Moore talks about this, the pseudo rituals. So if you go to an American university, they have fraternities, and you have to kind of almost do these certain rituals to be accepted in the fraternity. Those are pseudo
horrendous and quite childish, right?
Exactly. They're deeply rooted in that boy psychology. So it's doing something outrageous and just to get attention from the rest of the guys, just to earn that respect. So it's moving away from that. It's acknowledging that boy psychology. That's just a bunch of kids goofing around. The real rituals that we should be going into, and I don't think we can say that modern society has those rituals for men. The only closest thing we can relate to is maybe going into the army. So when you're going into the army and the process of training in the army, I guess that in itself is a ritual. Some of these countries, for example, Cyprus, Turkey, you're thrown into the army straight after high school, whether you like it or not. It's compulsory for a young teenage boy to go into the army and then decide. I think he does 2 or 3 years service, and then he decides what he wants to do with his future. So if he decides to study, then fair enough, or he decides to continue his his career in the army, then he'll do that. But I think we really lack that. We almost we've completely shut it off. We considered that as a very primitive tribal mentality, and we've just shunned it completely from society. And I think it's really important to do these rituals and almost so that you're cultivating those responsible sacrifice and masculine traits that we're talking about right now. So I think, it's transitioning from the boy psychology to the man psychology. The man psychology, through suffering, through sacrifice, through responsibility, through commitment, and through discipline, comes out at the end as a full-fledged man. Someone who is capable of creating a family, supporting the family as the head of the family, or someone who's decided to dedicate his life towards the service of society. So my friend and I, for the last couple of days, have been talking about these sort of topics, my climbing friend and I. And the thing that I pointed out to him is, as a guy, your main purpose is service as much as possible. As a woman, it's slightly different. For a certain period of time, you choose your career, you educate yourself, and then a good portion of women will decide to become mothers. So your service is now focused on building a family, whereas a man's service generally tends to be quite quite equal throughout his entire life. Yes, he creates a family, but at the same time, he knows that he has his wife to almost cultivate the family, and he only comes and goes whenever he needs to add something to that family. So obviously, back in the olden days, the man would go off and be the hunter-gatherer, whilst the female stays home and looks after the young. And that trait is still in us still. And I know a lot of people would say, oh, that's very primitive and we don't have that anymore. We don't have the primitive aspect of it in terms of, going out there hunting for food, but we do have that, the primitive archetypical sort of blueprint in us, almost, if you want to call it that. So we just need to manifest it in a different way in modern society. And I think Jordan Peterson talks about suffering and sacrifice being something that a man should be chasing. You should not be running away from suffering. And I don't mean suffering as kicking someone's ass on the street. I mean suffering in the sense that you take the burden of whatever situation you're in and you try your best to make it better for yourself and try and make it better for the people around you, regardless of whether it makes you happy or not. I think we get into this fairy tale mentality that we want to chase happiness. Happiness is not something we want to be chasing. Happiness is something either we have it in us naturally or we push it to one side and we decide to chase suffering and sacrifice. So that way you create this environment where the people around you are almost you're providing them the best possible way to bring them up or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. Getting on board with suffering is a first step forward in happiness. Not chasing happiness itself, but realizing, as the Eastern teachings will tell us, and for me specifically honing in on Buddhism, is that the first part of the Noble Path is that suffering is prominent in life. There is nothing but suffering.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean there's the two levels of suffering: the suffering that is there through everything, or the suffering that we increase around ourselves by, I'm not happy, so I'm going to chase happiness. That itself making us unhappy because we're not accepting that suffering is a fundamental of life. And then getting the understanding that suffering isn't a bad thing. It is a part of the reality.
Yeah.
And when we accept that it's there and we're okay with it, you can get on through your life just fine. And in fact, have moments of joy because you understand that the suffering is there. So the joy is also all that there is when you accept that that's how life is.
Yeah.
You know it. It's about the nature of your compass, about which way we're looking at it. Like, oh, we could go nihilistic and the world's so hard and I'm trying to avoid every bit of suffering I can.
Then you attract more suffering,
Yeah, you go in the cocoon of staying away from anything that you think will give you pain, which will not make us a fundamental aspect of society that provides something of worth, which innately gives us happiness and joy anyway, because we're giving something back. Like, we're part of the whole. So when we're giving to that and committing to that, you're gonna feel good. There's a very nice way of doing it through what your passions and interests and likes are, which is probably the best way to go about doing it. But when we're in a good remedy for depression or feeling sad or down, is go out and give something to someone or do something for someone else and become a part of the whole through that way. So maybe the excess factor of suffering is we want so much, or we want something other than what we have.
Yeah.
To welcome it, to go into a part of suffering, because that's where freedom is. We're no longer making it abstract or something that's avoidable. Like, suffering, I can avoid that if I just keep finding happiness. But then we're in a chase, and that chase won't end, it won't stop.
Yeah.
So it's to let go of that search and be where we are, accept that it's a part of that.
Yeah.
And that can be really misconstrued into something gloomy, I think, which again is another aspect the mind has to really reflect on to understand that suffering is a part of life and it's okay, that's what the reality is. Let's work with it. Let's not reject it. Let's not push it away.
Yeah, 100%. I think you can only acknowledge joy and happiness if you have an understanding of suffering. And you've almost embraced the suffering, so that way anytime you come across thing that's the tiniest bit joyful for you, you really accept it as joy and happiness. So I think the other thing that Eastern philosophy talks about, and I completely understand it. So back, I think it was podcast number 2 or podcast number 3, we talked about the ashrams. So we have the Brahmacharya ashram, which is the student ashram. Then we have the Grahast ashram, which is the householder. And then we have the Vanaprastha ashram, which is the retired person. And slightly to a certain degree, it's also renunciation. So giving up your material wealth, your status, etc., to live in the forest. Well, I do understand why the Brahmacharya ashram is always promoted in a way so the person that is in the ashram, the student, whether it's male or female, doesn't look for relationships at all. Purely focuses on their studies, purely focuses on their growth, and just make sure, you're almost creating your sort of path in that environment. You're cultivating the best traits you have in you, and you don't distract yourself with relationships and the typical teenage hormonal stuff that kicks in. And I really do understand the relevance of that now. As guys, I still feel, and I think we mentioned this on the second podcast, I really do think, even if you do a small period, I still feel like you should be... oh shit, my camera's just gone off. Okay, so what we're talking about, I feel as though when it comes to, as a man, I think even if you do it for a short period of time, I think being celibate is really important. Even if you go maybe 3 months or 4 months without any interactions with women, I feel as though you need to take that path at some point in your life, especially when you're young as well. So you learn the habit of going through these periods of isolation, celibacy, and just focusing on yourself. I think when a guy is a certain age and then he's looking for a woman to marry or a woman to be the mother of his children, what usually happens is we want to find the perfect person all of a sudden. So, for most of my life, I decide to be a slut, sleep around with multiple women, be promiscuous, etc., whatever terms you want to call it. And then I suddenly turn around at the age of 30, 32, thinking that, okay, now I'm looking to settle down with a person. And then you start to find that, wait a second, I can't seem to find this perfect person, And I think there's a saying that in order to get anything done, if you want someone to be... someone to have really good traits, you have to have those traits yourself. You have to create those traits yourself. So if you're looking for a woman that's loyal, she's a great wife, and she's going to become a great mother, then you need to have those exact traits in yourself. You need to stop being this promiscuous human being almost. And I'm not putting down promiscuity. I'm just saying that, I think sometimes you need to just pack it in and focus on things that are a bit more important in your life. So focus on yourself, focus on your career, focus on creating, we talked about being a bit more conscious. So I think that's really important as a guy. I think that comes into the title of sacrifice. You decide to sacrifice your golden age, if you want to call it, or the period that you can sleep with as much women as possible. I think you sacrifice that ability, so then you either focus on one girl, so you find one person in your life and you want to stay with that one person. And yeah, obviously if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out, but you stay with that one person, you adopt very sort of husband-like traits, you're loyal, you're respectful, you almost appreciate everything your woman has to offer you, and then if need be, if it doesn't work out with that person, go through a period of celibacy, figure out what went wrong, figure out what's wrong, how you could have improved the situation, how you could improve yourself, and then if you need to go back into it, go back into it. I just don't think this lifestyle that we're living these days, where guys that are young and free are just having as much sex with as many women as possible. I just think it's not good for the mind.
Well, there's no training towards that or understanding about how it is. As you mentioned, these schools with Brahmacharya in India, and more in times past, more prominent than it is now. Yeah, there's nothing like that in the Western society. Your parents don't talk to you about the media and the movies and the films and the TVs and the music, and it's all about partying now. And this is what there was a song on there. I was just playing a random playlist with a personal training client the other day, and it's called Birthday, and it was just a random feel good playlist, and it was like, it's my birthday, I'm going to kiss who I want, I'm going to do what I want, and I'm not thinking about you. And it's like that attitude is pushed around so much unconsciously that people think, oh, this is how I feel, so I'm just going to be me and I'm just going to express me. 95% of the time they're not expressing themselves, they think they are. 95% of the time, if not more, we think, yeah, this is me, this is how I feel. When we're going off impulse, we're going off other people's opinions, which we believe are our opinions, which very much aren't. Because you have to look at society as a mainstream. Society's opinion is not your opinion. It's not. You're in it, but it's not organically came from you. And these are where we're affected by the surroundings and what's outside of us, and we need a very clear mind and a very long and deep period of self-reflection to understand who we are and what we can do with what we are without getting muddied into what everything else is and getting washed away into what society is. Because it's not to be against society. If you do that, you become an anarchist and you one of those people who like to riot all the time and swearing at the government, saying they're all out to get us and everything's a conspiracy. It's like, okay, there might be elements of suffering in how the social structure is, but that doesn't mean we abandon it. It means we become the light that we want to see. We want to be the change, as Gandhi's quote is, and we live that rather than blaming everything around it. We have to see for what it is. If that education isn't there, how do we get that in towards people and schools for teenage lads and teenage girls about the understanding of promiscuity? And it's just where you're bombarded on it by the media, and you think it's you because we've been brainwashed and programmed that much that we believe it's us. How do you see through that? Well, the easiest way is you look at what you're triggered by. So if we're having this conversation and somebody's like, but I love sleeping around all the time, or I don't want to have to sacrifice something. Look at the feeling that is associated with the thoughts and the conversation, and if it's quite heavy and gives you a sort of defensive reaction or ready to jump on the offense, look at why. That's it. That's all you have to do again and again and again until we untangle these knots, because behind all of that, we're consciousness, we're life having an experience. Your culture, where you were born, and your upbringing have affected the way that we think. So wherever we go, we're going to have to experience that. Know who you are now would be significantly different if you were born elsewhere with another culture and another viewpoint and another set of parents and different friends. So let's decode that topping, those layers, and see what's going on behind. Who are you really? Why do we want to do the things that we want to do? Let's unpack them. And get through to something that's beneficial. Like, we don't want to enter realms of suppression and repression towards sexuality. Like, you're a teenager and your hormones are going to be flaring up. Now, there are no safeguards to what you should do, because mass media says do what you want and sleep around and party and all this stuff. So you're at that age where we don't know any better. The feelings are telling us to do that because the hormones are building up. We enter college, university, where you've got free reign to do that and are fact promoted and told to because everybody else is doing it, which leads us when that is a transition over into adulthood. But we don't have the guidance. This is why people like Jordan Peterson, who's a bit quiet now, isn't he? He's going through his own issues with drug dependency, which was sad to hear. But we're all human. So having guidelines and teachers who can put these teachers into place, which I think is really where my interest in the Eastern philosophies and religions really came about, because they were teaching me things that I had disengaged from Christianity and more common religions over here in the West. I was never Christian or Catholic or anything like that. I didn't have an interest in it, because again, if society had pushed me away from looking at these or taking them seriously, while the East was attractive to me, go, okay, what they're saying is you can have all of these things, but here's what happens when you do. And if you want to refine a certain path, here's what you get from doing that. So the guidance it's difficult, man, for people that age, and with the internet being the source of information for the people who are coming, who will be our leaders or who will be relevant in society. What is the message? Always, what is the message? Is it about us? Is it as in the me, the I? What am I getting from this? I want this, I want that. Or what is it that the I can do for others? What is that part of us it wants to share and give? And I don't just mean share a picture of what I've had for dinner. Or, I think the development of, which we're talking about quite often, the social media, but the aspect of it that highlights the I, the selfie, the iPhone, the things that are just about us. What is it doing to our psyche? What is it doing to our mind? And what is it doing to that growth of going from a boy into a manhood? Like, it just seems it will just hit a stunt, and I think it has done for many of us, because we're told it doesn't need to develop any further because of the lifestyles that we live with abundance. And it's very it's a very sticky and tricky one for people to get out of until the relevant directors of it can step through and lead in a good way that people think, yeah, that works. Like Peterson did so much for so many young people, myself
100%.
included.
Yeah, 100%. Same as well. I think this is what we're lacking. I think we're lacking proper masculine role models. You know, guys that teach us what we should be doing, guys that tell us that what we're doing is dumb. You know, what was Jordan Peterson's famous words? He said that clean your own room up, and it's so simple. It just shows you that instead of you trying to deal with the rest of the world, you trying to complain about the sort of the elections, the government, you know, which party's in charge, what people are doing wrong and higher up. Sort your shit out. You know, most of us have not even got all our stuff sorted out. We're abusing alcohol, we're abusing drugs, we're abusing sex, pleasure, etc. So we don't have to face the reality that we have all these problems. Sort the issues that we have on the inside before we start going outside saying this policy is wrong, this is wrong, and this is wrong. I think that's where the change needs to happen. And and I think the other thing I wanted to talk about is in today's society, I think the roles are starting to become very much blurred. You know, a lot of nuances coming out of this. A lot of the traditional female roles, because obviously the way society was back then where women weren't really allowed to work, understandably are changing, and now more women are going into the workplace and there's more of a rally for women to be working, etc. Having said that, I think there's more of also a woman that decides to settle down and have kids and decides not to work instead almost gets the stick out for some reason. You know, it seems as though being a mother is not considered respectful compared to progressing your career. But most women will tell you that once they get to a certain age, their career just becomes a side thing now, and they want to focus on creating a family. That natural instinct kicks in. They want to create a family, and it's very dangerous when you start telling people whether that career path is right, or whether you should be pursuing a career path, or whether the path of becoming a mother is right or wrong. I think you should let people do whatever they want. Don't try and force your agenda on them, and allow people to become individuals as opposed to a collective group of thoughts. And the same again on the masculine aspect, where, like I just said, we don't really have those role models telling us you need to stick to one woman as opposed to going around sleeping with as many women as possible, because those traits, again, like we just talked about previously, are deeply rooted in boy psychology. It's what young guys do. Young impulsive guys, when those hormones kick in, that's what your inclination is to do. You know, you have those feelings inside you, so you think the only way you're gonna sort of resolve those feelings and all those pent up sort of emotions inside you, the testosterone build up and stuff, is to act on that. And I think it's not the right way to go forward. I think you need to almost do the opposite, which is sit there, think about your own thoughts, think about what's going on in your head, and see if, you know, playing out that situation is the right thing you want to do. I just think in today's society, we just don't have those role models for guys that are prominent, and they're not pushed as well. So if you look at the media, you know, name me a role model that's a guy that's pushed. Even Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson was the most sort of controversial guy that was out there for a good couple of years, because people were strawmanning. And
he's not even controversial, really, is he? Like, you listen to what he says and it's sense.
Yeah, and I just don't understand how some people have just put all these words into his mouth. I started to understand what the word strawmanning meant, because I never knew what that exactly meant. And then Jordan Peterson kept talking about it. He goes, all that happens is people start putting these words into his mouth. Oh, he's saying that he's against transgender people, he's a transphobe. Oh, he's saying that, you know, he's a right wing, sort of extreme right wingist. All this kind of stuff, and he said nothing about it. All he's doing is he's giving his perspective in terms of what he's learned in his clinical psychology career, and saying to guys, you know, sort your shit out. And I think he's helped so many guys out. Like you said, you and I are one of those people. Obviously, we probably are not to the extent of some of these other guys that have turned their entire life around, but still, it's really, I think we need to appreciate people like that, you know?
Yeah, we do. They need to be championed. They definitely do, and spoke about more. And, you know, the message, or what we're trying to convey with this conversation is not so much a telling off to men or to boys, because it's an uphill battle. Like, the stacks are against us as we're doing those things. Like,
yeah,
you know, I think of my growing up, and it was very normal and in line with what happens with today's lads, except for now it's even greater, it's even harder because of the social media tools and because of how degraded the media is in terms of sexuality, in terms of live for the moment, even carpe diem, you know, seize the day has been changed to YOLO, you've only got one life, you only live once. So people say that's right, let's party hard and put our foot down to the gas, and it's like, doesn't mean that. It means live as greatly as you can, be in the moment, live as greatly as you can in it, not just let's party and drink to excess and have a fun time and burn out. It's do something with it, do something of meaning with it. So it's enforcing that message, I think, and to share it out. And even the things, as you mentioned, like the video games at the start, when you've got video games all around you and you know you're feeling good by playing these games of this, or watching a lot of movies or TV, you actually get that dopamine fix and that feeling of your brain going, oh yeah, I'm great, I'm this hero, I'm the one who's achieving, I don't need to do any actions in the real world now because we're getting stimulus from that. And that's the same thing with porn or sleeping around a lot, is the action's done, this makes me feel great, and they just reinforce these negative behaviours through a means of nothing positive. It doesn't help anybody or anything, but the brain is then being tricked into thinking it is, thinking it is doing the right things. Then we create the habits which make these things, the games, the media, the going out, the sleeping, or whatever, it all gets so difficult to eradicate from the system because society unfortunately doesn't fulfill any safety or any true understanding, which gives a yearning for these teachings and these schools that you mentioned in India, or a different way that society as a whole needs more responsibility towards it. Because how the hell is a young guy supposed to figure this out? I didn't have this conversation. I wasn't thinking like this until I got into consciousness and other teachings in psychology, in my mid-20s. Until that point in meditation, oblivious to all of it, thinking I was doing what's normal and right, because we're living conditioned until we're set free. And once you've set free and you've got the responsibility, all right, it's on your shoulders now. But until then, it has to be spoken to friends, because we're not even aware enough to see I'm doing this again and I keep getting burnt. We'll just keep getting burnt. We don't even realise, that's how it is. That's how it is. It's sad. It's tough.
Yeah, definitely. I think going back to what you said about the video games, it just shows you like how many, if you look at the ratio or the percentage of how many gamers are men, you'll see that it's dominated it's like 9-1. 90%, almost 95%, maybe even pushing it up to 98% of gamers are men. There's a reason for that. Men, deeply rooted within men is this desire, this inclination, this almost drive for adventure. We're striving for any form of adventure, but because we're not living through those adverse times, or we're not living through these situations that bring those traits out of us, those sort of warrior or those leader traits out of us, what usually happens is we channel that energy towards video games. So we're playing an advantage game on our TV, and we're striving for adventure in that environment, or we're pushing ourselves into watching movies and TV shows, so we're almost taking the role of the main character, so we can almost escape reality's burden on us. So again, we're looking for adventure, but we're projecting it into these sort of superficial or artificial creations instead of using it for in the real world. So going back to that book I was reading, Tribe by Sebastian Junger, he talks about the sort of the desire of, not just for men but also for women, for having sort of meaning or some purpose, or being in an environment where people need them, their services are required. So there's an example that he gives. So it was October 1958, there was a mining accident in America where I think there were 174 miners that were, I think they were mining coal or some sort of resource, and there was a sudden accident, and I think the whole place collapsed. And I think, I can't remember the exact figures, but 74 men died, almost completely buried alive, and only 100 survived out of those 174, or they were trapped inside. So what would happen is these men would be forced to work together. They didn't have any food because all the entrances were blocked. They had to kind of dig themselves out. So they would put themselves into groups, and they would work around the clock to making sure that they're able to dig and also help the bodies that are buried as well. So pull those bodies out as well. And what would happen is they would segregate themselves. So there'll be almost a inter-society created. An intra-society created within that group of men. So some of those guys would divide themselves into leaders, and other people would just be, management. So they're managing all the work that's going on. But the leading traits are very interesting. So there were two groups of leaders. In the groups of leaders that required immediate action. So, for example, there was a scenario where a man was buried under a rubble. His leg was buried under a rubble, and the decision needed to be made whether to cut his leg off or amputate his leg, or try and just leave him there or pull him out. And the man begged and pleaded for the men around him to cut his leg off, but because the leaders of that group didn't want him to die, they decided not to cut his leg off. But in the process of not cutting his leg off, he died because of obviously a blood clotting and the situation. So it shows that in certain situations, certain men have certain traits. So the traits in that scenario required men to be a bit more sort of brutal, a bit more stern. Become almost emotionless, and to just say the right decision is to cut his leg off, and then if he dies through bleeding out, that's a different scenario, but at least he's got the best sort of chance of survival. And then there's a second group of men. So once they figured out that, oh God, like, we're going to be in here a lot longer than we think we are, and we might die, a good portion of us might die, there was another group of leaders that came out. So the original leaders that were stern, telling people, delegating certain tasks to people, saying, this is what we need to do, this is what we need to do. Those leaders almost kind of took a backseat, and another group of leaders came out, which were a bit more emotional, a bit more caring, a bit more sympathetic. So those two traits, they're both masculine traits and feminine traits. They were created in this small environment, and I found that that entire study really fascinating. There were studies done on this, the psychological aspect of this scenario, and I found it really fascinating how in this little group of men that were trying to survive, there were two sorts of leaders that came out depending on the situation. So once they figured out that the situation was dire, most of them were going to end up dying, the second group of leaders that came out were very much there to motivate the men to continue going, to almost not give up. And it just shows you, I think Sebastian Junger was saying that in an environment where women are not there to do that task, so women are naturally inclined to be obviously sympathetic, compassionate, mothering, almost helping you out in the sense of giving you assurance, etc. When there aren't women to do that, certain characteristics in men will cause a group of men to step up and take that role, whereas the same thing happens in a group of women as well. So you get certain women that will be stern, a bit more masculine driven, the traits will be a bit more masculine, and another group of women will have the typical feminine traits. So it just shows you that it's almost saying we need these gender roles, as much as that's controversial these days to say that we need gender roles, but it just shows you in environments where it's just a single sex, those gender roles are almost cultured.
Yeah, it shouldn't be controversial to say that. This comes back to the I am me, I feel like this, I can do whatever I want because it's how I feel. Where's that feeling coming from?
Yeah.
Your lack of, or the only conditioning and education you have, that's it. Because when we can accept and allow other perspectives and see that it's not a personal attack, it might be better if, I feel like doing that, but is it actually going to help? And why do I want to react that way? While having, say, gender roles is required. You cannot have a baby if you've not got a man and a woman. That's because we've got two separate roles, we've got two separate genes that are going to create that life force. And that is the balance. We're in a dual world, it has its two aspects. And as you said earlier, inside of us, we've got that polarity, and we all have different levels and different degrees of it, and they can change depending on the situation. Somebody who is very well balanced can read the situation well and go like, okay, like think of how it can be with clients. You can have a bit of a laugh and a joke and all right, let's get this training done, and then they keep messing around and don't want to talk. It's like, right, come on, we're here to do a job, and you can switch that. And that's because you're trying to pull the best out of that person to get the job done. It can't be done from the egotistical manner of the abuse of power or the inferiority complex of not being strong enough to say something. You know, it's developing those traits, which we can all do, and that's when it feels uncomfortable. Is I wanted to tell my friend this, but I didn't want it to be uncomfortable. And it's like, well, you could have helped them if you were willing to feel uncomfortable, and you would have strengthened yourself because you saw something that person could not.
Yeah.
So it's of great benefit, like in the cave situation where they're stuck in. If one of the guys was a bit too soft and he's like, no, I think, we'll take a rest, we'll dig later, and you're going to be tired, and very, very soft. They might not have got out while you've got the guys like, come on, keep digging, cracking the whip, might tire them out and kill them. Yeah. So there's always observing that balance and learn to have a sharp mind to know, to discern what should be done at what point.
Yeah, I think we need to appreciate both aspects of human beings, the masculine and the feminine traits, and not to just say, I don't want to be this aggressive person, or I don't want to be, I don't want to hurt anyone in the group. A lot of women tend to have that issue where they're quite agreeable. And agreeableness is not a bad thing. It's the fact that in a certain scenario, you need it, and in other scenarios where you think things are not getting done, you need to be a bit more stern. And I think people shy away from that in the fear that they may become someone that other people will not like. So yeah, I completely agree. I just think when it comes to the topic of strong men, it's no different to strong women, right? It's pretty much the same traits. You just need to look at the situation and see how is this situation panning out, and what characteristics do I need to bring out in order to get the best out of the situation, in order to get the best out of other people in the situation. And this is where leaders are created, aren't they? Where you get the best out of each situation. If you ever read or if you listen to Simon Sinek, he talks about leaders eat last, and it's a very primitive trait. Again, it goes back to evolution and how in the caveman days, if I was going to go hunt probably a dangerous animal, let's say go hunt a mammoth, and I say to you, look mate, I need your help to hunt this mammoth, let's take it down, and then we can bring the food back and feed everyone, you'd be like, yeah, sure, let's go. But if I suddenly say to you, like, sorry mate, I've got to go get those berries, I'm off to get the blueberries. Yeah, exactly. If you decide that, you know what, I'm not going to help this guy, I'll fuck him, and then I look at you and just think, okay, that's cool. But then I go off and I get someone else to help me, I'm not going to obviously feed you, I'm going to say, piss off. Why should I give you a portion of the food if you decided not to help at all? So it's going back to those basic, simple instincts and realizing that we're much better off as helping each other out as much as possible, pushing each other. But at the same time, someone who's in a leadership role should not be thinking about, how am I going to profit from this situation? What he should be thinking about, or what she should be thinking about, is how do I bring everyone else up in this situation at the same time? And I think, going back to video games, the one reference I can bring up is who's the creator of Nintendo, the main guy, Shigeru
Miyamoto.
Yeah, Shigeru. What was his surname? Miyamoto.
Miyamoto. Yeah.
Shigeru Miyamoto. When we had the financial collapse in 2008, and every single company was suffering, he decided to take a massive pay cut so that a portion of his previous salary could be paid towards his workers or his management and his staff underneath, because he believed that in an environment such as where you need to create these video games which require creativity, which require good morale, which require clear thinking, if he decides to be that one guy that says, you know what, screw you guys, I'm going to keep all the money, I'm going to look after myself, and I'll let you guys get redundant, you're going to get nowhere. The company suffers. Long-term wise, the company suffers. So it's looking at your friends and your colleagues almost as your family, your blood, and you want to do everything for your blood, so do the same for those people as well.
Yeah, man. Being National Earth Day today, World Earth Day, International Earth Day. I just wrote a post about it earlier, and just my thoughts towards it. And if you're a part of Earth, you're a part of the whole, you're part of all of it. The Dalai Lama just said the other day that if you're in a spaceship, you look out at the Earth, there's no borders. Like, you just see the Earth, you just see the islands and the blue and the green, and that's it. The borders and the limits that we create are our own. We're a part of all of it. And it's to bring that into everything that we do when we can. It doesn't mean we don't work on ourselves or we don't do things that we like to do. It's finding those things that we like to do and putting them in alignment with service to others, which is so grateful. And perhaps you're not a leader, perhaps that leadership, that strong masculine quality for the guys that are looking to develop it, maybe it isn't there. Maybe you're much better at supporting other guys, or you're much better at listening or talking, or maybe you're artistic. It's like those tribal traits aren't necessarily required for every single thing we do, but if you've not got your own house in order, see which traits are required to do that, because not everybody has to be Simon Sinek. Our own paths are our own paths, but it's developing, observing what am I afraid of, because in that fear you'll see what traits you need to no longer be afraid. They need to be developed, and a lot of it is I want to say leadership, but self-reassurance is understanding who they are, that they can get through these fears on themselves without needing somebody or something. It's like, okay, I can do that, and when you know you can do it, you're much more comfortable and calmer when you've released the fear. And yeah, it's just becoming part of the whole.
Oh, just give me a second. There's a fire engine going past. There we go. So I couldn't hear from the microphone. Okay. Yeah, I think, like you said, not everyone's designed to be a leader. Some people just prefer to be the guys on the floor, just being told what to do, but getting the best out of those situations. I think that's completely fine as well, as long as you're not becoming bitter about it. If you feel as though people are telling you what to do and you don't enjoy it, then it just shows you that you're not made for that role. So step it up, do something that puts you higher up in the hierarchy, if you want to call it.
Definitely.
But yeah, I just think it's so what do you think makes a strong man, or a strong human being, should we say?
Strong man or a strong human? Which one?
I don't know, both traits can be correlated into both sides, so human beings and men. But what do you think makes a strong man different to a strong human being?
I would say, as we were saying before, about those different roles that we have, because again, if we were to say that they're both in the same, we're blurring those lines and we're making no separation, or everything's free to be whatever it is, which I'm not saying it's not, but what it is you have innate qualities and innate abilities. I can't carry a baby around in my body, a woman can, so there's obvious separations and differences. I think to be a strong man is to use your masculine traits in let's look at the basic elements of what male and female would have. And for masculine, it would be that strong care that a man can give, to be open and to be strong. It's like, I was having a conversation with a friend in Amsterdam once, and I was talking about the strength and vulnerability, and he was like, don't give me that load of shit, it's soft. And it's like, man, you mustn't, perhaps you don't understand what the link with vulnerability and strength is it's very easy. And I know that when you put your walls up as a man, you can't feel any emotion. Like what you were saying in the cave scenario, is you put these walls up and it's like brick after brick, and you really, really cannot feel. And the problem is, you think you are, you think it's either a numbness, or you have your little bits of happiness, or you have a little pep of a coffee and you feel good, or whatever it is. And it's like, yeah, okay, things are normal, but 100% that is not what being strong is. That's being isolated, that's cutting, that's being weak, because we cut things off, we cut the world out, we cut emotions away. We are heart and mind, we've got these two aspects going on. And it's only when we start to become vulnerable, which takes a fuckload, it takes courage, and it takes bravery to say, man, I feel like this, I feel scared, I feel sad, I don't feel love, I want to do more, whatever it is, whatever that feeling is, to be vulnerable, which requires truth. Because the walls and the cutting ourselves off from the world, it isn't truth, it's isolation, it's antrophic, isn't it? It's going the other way. So that's what the difference with vulnerability and how vulnerability is strength, because you can just let it be. And when you're capable of that, you can be a real good masculine leader, or you can be a very good male friend, because you're balanced. Yeah. And you can have those developments in strength where you, as we said before, you can see things in people that you can help pull up, or which kind of person wants to be how you are. So yeah, developing the masculine traits of the elements of masculinity which are more aligned to being male, and being a good human, which everybody's capable of, is seeing when we can use any of our traits to get the best from somebody, and we can offer the best of ourselves. Something that I've struggled a lot with was the individualization of who I am, or any individual, of who you are, yet you're part of the whole. So we can go into that space of everything's one, so nothing really matters. I'm not important, so it doesn't matter what I do. But that isn't true, because yes, you are part of the whole, but you're an individual. And if you haven't explored your own individuality, how can you provide a service or give to people when you don't know what it is that you can do? That's when you just become a follower and you do nothing. Like, yeah, I'm just a drone. I'm just a machine then, because there's nothing going on there. It's to know who you are as an individual and use those traits well for others, for the best of life, you know? And I think for me, that's how you be a really efficient, effective, happy and loving human.
Yeah.
Offer the best of yourself out as an individual, part of the whole.
Yeah, 100%. I just want to talk a bit about the mentioning of vulnerability. I think in today's society, it's so, I don't know whether it's been created by society or whether it's something that we've created ourselves to almost force people to see our vulnerability. But I just feel as though, especially as men, when you're showing your vulnerable side, you only show your vulnerable side to people that you trust. You know, it's very dangerous to put a post up on social media and say, oh, I've gone through this and I've gone through that. You're giving your perspective on a situation. You know, maybe you've broken up with a girlfriend or someone's cheated on you. You're giving your perspective on a situation. And then you're going to get a response from people that know nothing about you. And they will support whatever you're going through because they see that extract and they followed you for a reason, so they're going to support wherever you say. I think that's very dangerous. I think when it comes to vulnerability, maybe even for women as well, I think this also needs to be mentioned, I don't think it's healthy for us to show our vulnerability in front of strangers, you know? So have a group of friends that you really support, that you know that really care about you. Oh, my battery's dead. Yeah, so I think it's really dangerous for us to put ourselves out there, make ourselves vulnerable in front of people that don't know anything about us. And we fall into that trap because people are still trying to figure out how to become more authentic on social media. How do you present this image that doesn't show the glamour, the lifestyle that you're living is always happy? You want to show this almost, again, vulnerable side, but it's how you show that. And I don't think we've fully figured that out. So for me, if you haven't fully figured something out, I think the best thing you can do in this situation is to not push whatever you think you know about it out there. So, you know, I see a lot of posts from a lot of our colleagues and a lot of our friends that talk about, you know, the issues that they're going through, mental health, anxiety. It's great if you've gone through that and you've come out of it on the right side. It's good to say, this is what my experience was and this is how I dealt with it. But whilst you're going through that situation, I think it's very dangerous for you to put stuff out there for the world to judge, you know.
Yeah, man, well said. It's an interesting one because there's always like a catch-22 with anything, right? Like if we don't talk about these things, I have a friend who started something called the Happiness Project, and he's tried to take his life a couple of times and going through a lot of mental health issues. And he started this whole project, which has now got thousands of people involved from here to Australia. You know, amazing. A lot of happiness and a lot of understanding and being there for people through his vulnerability. But at the same time, it can feed narcissistic elements of ourselves and elements of that attention that we're craving or not getting elsewhere. It's like, oh yeah, I think I might have mental health issues as well. Oh yeah, I think I am depressed actually. And then we get onto that bandwagon because we're always following trends, and we're always following what's working for certain people. And it's the danger of social medias, man. It's great to get messages out and share it, but what should remain private and who should you go to a professional for help? Actually, you don't need to tell the world about that because we've not figured it out yet. Yeah. You know, gauging that between, oh, I've been through this and this could help someone. I think I really like what you said there. I think that's such a smarter way to do it is if you've got an issue, reach out to somebody you're following also a professional that you know of who can help with that particular issue. And if you've been through it and done it and you want to offer your services out, go for it. There's a difference of having social media for your services that you offer or just because it's a bit of fun. It's not a bit of fun anymore, social media. Like, you are reaching a lot of people are reading your messages, or they're seeing your content, they're seeing your images. What message are you sending out? No longer is it a bit of fun, because I guarantee if you're looking at your feed just to see if you've got another like or if somebody said something, you're not doing it for a bit of fun. You're not doing it for you. Some part of the ego is wanting that, whether it's the superior complex or it's an inferior complex, is a part that's looking for some sort of validation to figure out who they are. Like, I'm not saying it's coming from a rotten place, but I'm saying it's coming from a point of, I need confirmation of something somewhere. And there's always the dopamine and the serotonin receptors that are getting their fix from it as well now, which is massively ingrained into our neuroplasticity. So, what are we saying and why? Have we been through something that we can help with? Great, go for it. Are we saying it just to say it? Maybe go find somebody who can help on a private, personal level. It doesn't have to be shared out.
Yeah, completely. Even if that person is just a friend, a really good friend, it's better to, even if it's better to kind of pour out to that friend than to give it out to complete strangers. I think I don't know where I came across this video, but there's an interesting situation where there was a really prominent figure on YouTube that helped a lot of guys out, and this guy had a big issue, so he wrote this 3-page email and sent it to this guy, and the guy was talking about in his videos, he goes, so I received this 3-page email and I was just like, fuck, how am I going to answer this whole thing? Because there's a lot of stuff. So about 2 days later, the guy that sent the email sent a reply back. He goes, thank you, coach. I figured it out. I know what I need to do. And he goes, what are you talking about? I haven't replied back to you. He goes, well, by writing it all down and then reading it again, I figured out what the issue I'm going through and how to resolve it on my own. So I think that's a great thing as well. So we're talking about back in the days when we used to write diaries and notes and stuff. I think that is great. If you're going through anything, write it down and then put yourself into a situation where you're someone that's replying back to those issues. So make it someone that you don't even know of. So let's say if you admire someone, so let's say we admire Jordan Peterson, let's say we don't know Jordan Peterson, we write it down as what Jordan Peterson's response would be to those questions that you have or those insecurities you have, and you'll find your own answer through that. But don't share that with the world, because then what will happen is people will give you false answers based on what they think they are seeing. I think it's very dangerous to be doing that. So yeah, I'm glad we talked about that.
There's also that aspect of negative reinforcement too.
Yes.
Which can happen a lot, which will happen with guys and girls. Take a breakup example. A lot of girls could be like, you're better than him and he's not worth your time anyway, and it's, just finding things to support the reasons why, rather than going, well, maybe it happened because of this, or it's okay, this happens in life, rather than slating the opposite side, or for guys to be like, don't worry, just playing fish in the sea, and just keep going, let's go have a drink. And there's ways to ease people and help with them, but also are people just telling us things because they think that that's what we want to hear, or it's just the automatic response? How's your day? Fine, great. Yeah, like the standard automatic mechanical responses without any true heart or reflection. So to choose the people that we're going to speak to quite wisely as well, which with the internet, that beautiful part of it is those people are all out there and we know who they are, who we want to talk to for what issue that we have, if we don't have the specific friends around us who can benefit us in that way.
But do you not think also that some people, even though they know that there are people out there that can help them out, they'll purposely avoid them and go to the people that they know that will give them the assurance.
They'll tell them what they want to hear.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So we have to catch ourselves out doing that as well.
Yeah. It's always remembering the problem isn't out there, it's not that person, it's our response to it. It's always us. So it's, why do I feel that way? Why is this so hard? Why don't I want to do that? Why am I struggling with this? Figuring it out ourselves, and if we can't get there, we ask for the help of the people who know how to do it, not the ones who are going to pour honey into our ears.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a great place to wrap up. That was another 7 minutes to add to our time. Just check on the recording. That's been about
just 1 point
minutes.
On the video games as well, man.
Yeah.
Actually, because I picked up one for the first time in a long time. I was playing Halo games on the Xbox. I used to love him growing up and playing him, and yeah, I played him for a bit, and then like I got bored of it. But it was remembering why I used to play them a lot or love movies, because I do love movies and specific TV shows. I think personally, I've finally picked the things that I watch and have done for a while, because I want to emphasize certain parts of myself, and going through games that inspire me or have certain traits, very heroic games or heroic films, or things that expand consciousness or on a spiritual level, because they pull the best traits out of me. But if we just sit there and watch and never act upon it, which is so easily done, that's when it becomes more of an issue than a benefit. It was either yourself or my friend Ben who said, Jordan Peterson said, what the best, I think it was Ben, in our talk, so the best way to learn is if you can do it through entertainment.
Yeah, we talked about that as well. The last podcast.
It must have been you then, Chet, who said it. And it's such a good point, man. That if you can learn through entertainment through it, why not? Do it, but make sure you action it. There's a great Zen line that says, talking about the rice doesn't get it cooked. So you can't just talk about rice, you've got to go out and cook it. Watch the films, play the games, do the things that inspire. Don't give it your entire life to them. Get the inspiration you need, go out and do it. Get it done, be it. And then that is taking off the whole hero's journey, which is Joseph Campbell's book, The Hero of 1,000 Faces. Incredible for understanding what your personal hero's journey is and stuff that I like to do work with.
Yeah, it's action, powerful, isn't it? It's putting into place action. Yeah.
Action.
Yeah. Perfect. Action. Right. It's been a great podcast. It started off talking about men, and then it went into all this other stuff, and also a slight amount of mental health stuff as well. But yeah, it's been good, Craig. Have you got any other things to add to this podcast?
All good, brother. All good. Happy Earth Day.
Happy Earth Day to you too.
Look after the earth, man. Look after the earth.
Yeah. Okay, guys. So again, this podcast is on YouTube. It's on Spotify. It's on SoundCloud. And a preview of it is on IGTV as well. So yeah, it's been fun, Craig. This is podcast number 10. Was it 10?
Is it 10? Was this number 10?
Yeah, it was number 10. Yeah.
Wow. I'm gonna double digits.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to find an image now for this podcast, because our last image was really good, right?
Yeah, it's cool, that.
Yeah.
Even though it wasn't me, it was still cool.
No one will know.
It was a silhouette.
Yeah, it was a really good picture. It described the entire podcast. Okay, perfect. So we'll see you guys in the next podcast.
Yeah,
done.
A lot of love.